3 strands. Still here. Yeah, you can go. Yeah. I don't have anything else for you. I mean, you could stay if you want to, but it's sort of late. And don't you have things to be doing? Friends, etc. You got tea. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Hades. Feminism in the underworld. Or you've crossed that out and put unexpected feminist icon. Really? Okay. What are your arguments? Okay, no. I'm gonna let you explain this one. Because I don't quite buy it just yet. Given how intensely patriarchal their society was, and intensely misogynistic by today's standards that the Greek myths were. But, I'll grant you this on a few points that don't fully, in my brain, justify your argument. But Hades, it could be argued, was a more benign force than his brothers Zeus and Poseidon, and potentially some of his other fellow gods, like Athena and such. What have you put? Respect for Persephone's autonomy. Just bullet points for now. Do you have anything more on that? You know, he kidnapped her, yeah? He literally abducted her. Okay. I guess I can sort of view this in the context of the time and in comparison to his brothers and such. Okay. Persephone did indeed rule as a sort of right-hand person with, it could be argued, a sort of equality of sorts, a parity. She did happily, maybe not happily initially, but did seize on the opportunity to be the queen of the underworld, and willingly returned for 3 to 6 months of the year. I say 3 to 6 months. It's sort of debated which that is. Persephone, who was the god of spring, as you know, or the goddess of spring, whose mother, Demeter, was the goddess of the harvest. Her going to the underworld every year at exactly the same time for 3 months is seen as when the harvest dies, which gives us the seasons. So theoretically, she would be in the underworld in winter. But it's debated, of course, whether or not she's there for half the year. Maybe, I don't know, winter and autumn, potentially. But she did go willingly. I think we need to make sure not to be too generous in our interpretation of that particular myth, which we still need to recognize by modern standards, particularly of feminism and the word feminism in today's meaning. That abduction isn't necessarily seen as equal rights, potentially. What else have you got? You've put equality and power. Yeah. You've said empowerment of female characters. Go on. How do you figure? Beyond Persephone. I could speculate that Eurydice, who was Orpheus's lover, who Hades sort of carved out quite a nice place for in the underworld, is potentially the person that you are referring to there. I mean, Hades, much like his brothers, didn't have a particularly good relationship necessarily with any of the other female gods. Hestia, potentially. But beyond that, the last point you've put down here is non-aggressive. I imagine you have some fleshing out of this particular thought experiment to go. Non-aggressive. No one particularly liked Zeus or Poseidon or any of his siblings. They were a troublesome bunch, very much preoccupied with war and sex and love and lust and bloodshed and all of these things that Hades didn't necessarily consider his domain. He was interested in controlling what was his, in maintaining order in the underworld. He was an admin guy, you know. He wanted just to make sure things ran smoothly, and one could argue that empathy was a trait that Hades possessed, potentially an uncommon trait. Now, if you were wanting to further argue this point, you might want to draw comparisons to Pandora, for instance, which is pretty classic mistreatment of a woman, or Medusa. Let's start with Pandora. You know the story of Pandora. Pandora's box, not the jewelry company. Is Pandora a jewelry company? I think so. Pandora's box, or what might have been Pandora's medium-sized jar. Pandora was the first woman to be conjured into existence. Until that point, all dudes, all men, full sausage fest. So, Zeus, to get back at his BFF, or former BFF, Prometheus, who we now call the god of fire, but at that point he was just a titan who, had taken a bit of a view of neutrality during the Titanomachy, which is the battle between the gods and the titans. And Zeus liked him. They were mates. One story has them conjuring or creating the human race, just boys, out of clay. But anyway, Prometheus thought one evening that the humans rather deserved fire. Now, this is spoke about in terms of literal fire, the ability to cook, the ability to forge weapons, the ability to heat ourselves, the ability to whatever. But it was such a magical force that one suspected it would rather defeat the purpose of the gods. And Zeus loved being worshipped. Oh, he wanted humans, these humans without fire, as his subservient race, just people to entertain him. Prometheus was a bit of a humanity sympathizer, so gave the humans fire. Anyway, Zeus, not chuffed. Not chuffed. So, he asked Hephaestus, god of the forge, master blacksmith for the gods, asked Hephaestus to craft a female. Females sort of already existed because, Zeus had sisters like Hera. So, created the first human woman and modelled this woman off all of the most beautiful gods. So, she was banging. To every last tiny detail. Nailed it. Hephaestus, great job. Gorgeous. this human woman too was taught all of these wonderful things, like, you know, how to keep a good house, how to hunt, how to cook, and then of course the art and skills of lovemaking, taught by none other than Aphrodite herself, potentially in a one-on-one session together, just you know, teaching her the ropes. For you to imagine. Now, Zeus, again, a bit of a long-winded prank or revenge by Zeus, but this is very much Zeus's thing. After she's fully furnished with skills and attribute points, Zeus sends this woman, Pandora, down to the mortals, where she marries Prometheus's brother. Slightly convenient for the story there, but we'll ignore that. Prometheus's brother is stoked, you know. This is a new woman thing. They haven't seen a woman to this point. They've been going through existence somehow, not fully sure here, but without females. Suddenly one exists. Prometheus's brother has wed her. Pretty stoked. Zeus, when sending Pandora down to Earth, to the mortals, equipped her, gave her a box or a jar, and said, classic Zeus, don't open it. I'm going to give it to you, but whatever you do, don't open it. I wouldn't. It would be a bad idea. Please don't. When you think of opening it, just forget that thought. And she didn't. For about 10 good years, something like that. She just had the most marvellous time. Women existed. People were just loving life. There was just nothing wrong with the world at all. Just picture paradise. Picture just pure heaven. Pure Valhalla. I guess in this world it's pure Elysium. Pure Shangri-La. Pure... It was all of these things. And then 10 years passed, and Pandora just sat looking at the box and thought, stuff it. Curiosity, it could be said, got the better of her. So, she opened the box, or the medium-sized container, and all number of evils flew into this world. Poverty, war, famine, all sorts, loads and loads and loads of things. These were all gods unleashed on humankind. But potentially, the most evil trick of all that Zeus had cooked up was that there was one last god to be released into this world from this tiny container. And that was hope. Because if all of these horrific things, these evils, had just been released into the world, humanity would have just given up, would have just called it a day, thrown themselves off a cliff, whatever. It would be too horrific. Just imagine. But hope, with hope, they would keep, or we would keep fighting to stay alive. So, Pandora is potentially a story that offsets the idea of any sort of feminism in ancient Greek myths. Possibly to be used as contrast for your argument that Hades was just a real GC. GC is a New Zealand slang that we don't need to get into. Now, have you heard of the Medusa? Or just Medusa? Medusa's her name. Yeah, the Gorgon is a person with snakes for hair who can petrify you with her gaze. You have heard of her. Did you know? Is she in this book? No, I don't think she is. Did you know that she was once an incredibly beautiful woman? Probably the most beautiful woman in all of Greece. She was also a priestess for Athena, for the Temple of Athena. She loved being a priestess, all about it. Her favourite thing was fully chaste, a virgin, much like Athena herself. Poseidon, as in the god of the sea, god of cool fork tridents, god of forks, he took a bit of a fancy to this priestess and really didn't like her sister. In fact, the siblings, the gods, were constantly warring with each other. They just seemed not to get along. But Poseidon and Athena, true rivalry. Anyway, Poseidon, in his infinite horribleness, decided to sleep with this priestess. Not nice. Athena, who you would think, being the god of wisdom, would have exercised some wisdom here, chose not to take it out on Poseidon, as you would expect, but instead chose to punish the priestess in what is definitely one of the more magnificent examples of female on female cruelty in this particular set of myths. But it doesn't stop there. It gets even stranger. So, Medusa is now banished to an island. She has snakes for hair, and every time anyone looks at her, she petrifies them with her gaze. Now she is portrayed as this villain, this monster, and bizarrely, it's how history has sort of remembered her. Athena now quips her new hero, Perseus. You may have heard of Perseus. Yeah, from Percy Jackson. Yeah, good. Perseus is now equipped with the tools by Athena to go and slay the Gorgon, Medusa, which is bogglingly cruel. Not only this, Perseus does of course do this, and there are all sorts of ways that this myth, I guess, could be explained in terms of morality or in terms of a message, because of course this is why these stories existed, because we're trying to impart knowledge, we're trying to teach lessons. Possibly, I would imagine in this case, to young men, about looking at the female gaze, and one could sort of draw these slightly interesting morals from these stories. Before Medusa was slain, she ended up having Poseidon's children, one of which was the famous winged horse, Pegasus, which he would be forgiven for thinking was Hercules. Heracles, from the movie Hercules. They didn't go into all of this weird detail about the Medusa stuff, suffice to say. Anyway, not ladies having the back of other ladies, you could say. I still haven't deterred you. Hey, I think it's fine. As I say, make sure to ground your arguments in the version of myths, the version of these myths that we know. Do you have any other ideas simmering on the pot? Do you mind? Why the Titanomachy is similar to Succession. I like this one too. To be clear, I like both. I'm just being critical. Familial conflicts is one of your bullet points. Yeah, there certainly are. So, the Titanomachy, if indeed that is how you pronounce it, where the gods fought the Titans in an epic 10-year war. Very, very long time to have a war. Was it more than 10 years? It was many years. Picture a sort of Dragon Ball Z fight with people throwing literal mountains at each other. The Titans, as their name suggests, well, I guess as their name has actually given birth to the definition of, were enormous. They were absolute giants, as big as planets, even. Can you name any of the Titans? Go on. You should at least be able to name Kronos. Kronos was depicted in art by eating his children, which he did. I'm not entirely sure that as he is depicted sort of tearing his kids' heads off, that's entirely how it happened. He seemed very much to swallow his kids whole, because they ended up, of course, coming back out of him reasonably whole. So, Kronos, who famously cut off his father's manhood bits, and just lobbed them across the earth. His father was Uranus, or you might know him as Uranus. So, lopped off his doodads, his giblets, and biffed them around the world. And out of which sprang Aphrodite. Aphrodite was born of Uranus's, things. Rather not how Botticelli ended up depicting it in The Birth of Venus, which is rather less graphic. Nice sort of shell and lake and all that sort of different stuff. So, Kronos, that's one. This is a question for you. Prometheus, as we've spoken about, not super active in the Titanomachy. Quite like the gods. Hyperion, don't really know what he did. Rhea, this is sort of where my knowledge starts to go as well. There was that one that, after the Titanomachy, was condemned to holding up the heavens, commonly confused with holding up the earth as punishment. Didn't hold up the earth, he held up the heavens, the cosmos. Can't remember his name though. So their war raged on for a very, very long time. I would even potentially be tempted to compare, if we had to compare them to a sort of modern movie, TV thing, whatever, the Avengers, potentially. These two epic factions, where one side gets special weapons or augmentations that turns the tide of the war. Think about, Thor's axe or whatever. It's sort of video gamey in a sense. Or maybe the opposite is true. The video games are like this, where Zeus and his siblings had to go off and find resources to improve them, to level them up, to go questing, to find different artifacts imbued with special powers. To do that, they had to unlock from the depths of Tartarus some other primordial beings that existed long before the gods. As part of the things that they unlocked, I could be wrong here, but I think that this is true, they found the Cyclopes, or the Cyclopses. The Cyclops, the things that are depicted as having one eye. What isn't commonly depicted in these cartoons, or whenever we would have seen them before, is the fact that they were ungodly blacksmiths. They were amazing at crafting these incredibly potent and powerful weapons. I guess there's a sort of similarity with the people in Avengers who craft Thor's axe. Are they dwarves? I can't remember. But these Cyclopes, these Cyclopses, turn the tide of the war by equipping these gods with weapons, of immense power. To Zeus, the king of the gods, or the leader of this particular army. I think he was probably yet to be crowned official king, but Zeus had done a lot of heavy lifting to this point. Zeus had freed his siblings from the belly of Kronos, and he was now leading them in battle. It could be said that he was a master tactician. He was gifted lightning bolts. So now, in this war where people are raining mountains on each other, Zeus can properly Kamehameha people out of existence. Remember that everyone in this battle is sort of immortal, so that's why it's lasting for a very, very long time. It's a tricky war to fight, the Titanomachy. To Poseidon, the god of the oceans, the water, everything underwater, fishies, forks, as we know, soup, maybe, I don't know, liquids. Poseidon was gifted his trident, his famous trident, with which he could further command these watery forces. And of course, fork things. Hades was gifted a hat. Just a cool hat. They called his cool hat the Helm of Darkness, which, let's be honest, is a very cool name for a hat. The Helm of Darkness. They had other titles for it as well, but I think the one that he preferred, and the one that I definitely prefer, is the Helm of Darkness. The Helm of Darkness could make Hades go invisible. Just imagine the implications. Going invisible. That's probably useful in a war. You reckon? I think so. So, is that much like Succession? No, to my knowledge, that didn't happen in Succession. But, no spoilers. There were certainly betrayals in both Succession and the Titanomachy. There were certainly Machiavellian tactics. They're fuzzy on what these tactics are, of course. They focus very much on the cool weaponry, and Zeus just being a sort of mad lad, just leading them into battle and stuff. But I like the principle of the argument. It's cool. How are you going to flesh it out further? Yeah, still just in the ideas phase. That's fine. No bad ideas in brainstorming, as I always say. So after the gods inevitably won because they had their jazzy weapons, they locked up the Titans in Tartarus. Tartarus is the effectively hell. Tartarus was also a god and a place. Wrap your head around that. Okay. What else do we have? Words that derive from Greek myths. I would suggest your other two previous ideas are more interesting and maybe have more meat on the bone conceptually. I mean, every foreword in every book about Greek mythology will speak about the derivations or the etymology of a lot of these sorts of words. I mean, interesting obviously, but that's why they're in the forewords. Go on. What's one of them? Let's think of a Greek god or goddess that is in a word or brand or whatever that we use today. I think Nike or Nike. You're from England, for whatever reason they pronounce it Nike. Nike or Nike is probably one of the first examples that people give. I believe Nike was the goddess of victory, which makes sense for a brand about shoes and running. What else can you think of? We can think of Titanic, Titan, or indeed the Titan. We can think of Apollo, who's in the space mission, and the sun god. Okay, question, camera brands. What do you reckon? Olympus, as in Mount Olympus, home of the gods, and the camera brand Olympus. Also EOS. You know how Canon cameras have sort of demarked their models by EOS. EOS is also a god. Pandora, of course. Jewelry, I think. Think about another jewelry or luxury brand. Hermes, or the god with wings on his sandals, who is the messenger god running between Zeus and the various others. He could be thought of as a sort of modern day media, as a means to message, as our social media, as a sort of modern day media tycoon. From that lens, he was actually obscenely influential. He was an influencer, perhaps. What else? Other words, other brands. Amazon, as in the Amazonians, whom we know from Wonder Woman, particularly famous Amazonian. The Amazonian Hippolyta was in A Midsummer Night's Dream. She was the queen of the Amazons. She was married to Theseus, quite like how Shakespeare would bring in these Greek myths sometimes as well. I think that's one of the most notable ones, Theseus and Hippolyta. Do you have any others? Ajax, maybe. Ajax isn't that like a cleaning brand? Makes sense. Ajax was a famous warrior in the Trojan War. Big, powerful guy. Swung a big hammer around. Anyway, if you can think of any others, of course, do let me know. Just write them down there. Okay, we could maybe park that particular idea, would be my advice. Up to you, of course. You've also written down here, tier list of Greek gods. Tier list. As in, do you mean ranking them based on their whatevers, their sort of hierarchy or power structure, or ranking them for other reasons? You've also put, could they beat the Norse gods in a fight? Focus on potentially your first couple of ideas. Also, the Norse gods in a fight thing, I think the Greek gods take it pretty easily. Do you want to take a gander as to why? What was going to be the central structure of your argument there? The Greek gods, yeah, because they're immortal. The Norse gods, don't get me wrong, they're great. They have magic, and if you were to talk about this sort of, for instance, to sort of compare two factions or two families, the Asgardians and the Olympians. No, I mean, the Olympians have it easy. The Olympians are literally immortal, and far, far more cruel, dastardly, not nice. Anyway, I think if you were to focus on one of your ideas, back to Hades, which I do like, feminism in the underworld, unexpected feminist icon, I would challenge you perhaps with finding a different way or a better way to frame it. I like how it is controversial, contrarian, provocative. You are wanting to invite discussion, to challenge preconceived notions, which it does. But play with this idea further. I think perhaps you currently lean very heavily on your discussion of Persephone. I wonder if we could also, let's see if it's in this book, Eurydice. A different tenet, facet, pillar of your discussion could be Eurydice. Orpheus and Eurydice is maybe leaning too heavily on the Orpheus component of that story, but going into how Hades treated Eurydice. Let's see. You're going to have this back. So, Orpheus. I presume you know the tale of Orpheus and Eurydice. Okay, well. Hades and Persephone too relented, giving permission for Orpheus to lead his beloved back into the light of the living. But there was one stipulation, as there always is. He must not look back at her, otherwise she must remain forever in the realm of death. You would think that would be pretty easy, but, you know. Such a precondition in the world of myth and folklore is made to be broken, yes, as we know, Pandora, etc. Yet the meaning of not looking back, in spite of its apparent familiarity, is unclear. It may be connected with the idea that what lies behind is a sacred and uncanny place, a description that certainly fits the underworld from which Eurydice had just emerged, and to which she is still closer than her husband. In any case, what is vital to stress is that in Ovid's narrative, there are no recriminations, just love and mutual understanding. In deadly silence, the two of them followed the upward slope. The track was steep, it was dark, enshrouded in thick black mist. Not far to go now. The exit to Earth and the light was ahead. But Orpheus was frightened. His love was falling behind. He was desperate to see her. He turned, and at once she sank back into the dark. She stretched out her arms to him, struggled to feel his hands on her own. But all she was able to catch, poor soul, was the yielding air. And now, as she died for the second time, she never complained that her husband had failed her. What could she complain of, except that he had loved her? She only uttered her last farewell, so faintly he hardly could hear it. Farewell. And then she was swept once more into the land of shadows. Got slightly distracted there, of course, by the Orpheus story.